Police thought they had shot a probable criminal in the middle of a street altercation. But when federal agents showed up 2 hours later and took control of the scene, the truth left everyone in shock. This isn't just a story about a late-night mistake. It's about a hidden mission, a loyal soldier, and a past the town never knew existed. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you believe in hidden heroes between us. On a windy, cold night in Millhaven, the streets lay mostly empty. The streetlights flickered, casting dim light on the roads. A few people hurried by, eager to escape the chill and find warmth indoors. The local diner, a popular spot for late-night coffee, was closing. Glenn, the owner, cleaned tables and counted the day's earnings. Outside, the sheriff's department was on a routine patrol, keeping watch over the town. Walt Higgins was an 83-year-old man who lived alone. He was a familiar face in Millhaven. Walt's house was small, filled with memories from his days in the military. Pictures and medals adorned the walls, speaking of times long past. Each evening, Walt visited the diner for a cup of coffee. Glenn always greeted him warmly, and they exchanged small talk about the day's events. Walt enjoyed these little chats. They broke the monotony of his quiet life. That night, after leaving the diner, Walt headed home. The wind tugged at his coat, but he walked with steady steps. As he passed by an alley, he heard a noise. It was a commotion, like a struggle. His instincts, honed from years of service, kicked in. Without a second thought, he approached the sound. In the dimly lit alley, 2 young men were grappling with a shop owner. The man was trying to protect his store from the intruders. Walt stepped forward, trying to help. He spoke calmly, hoping to ease the tension. But the situation was tense. One of the young men suddenly pulled out a weapon. Walt's hand went to his side, where he carried an old gun from his military days. It was a habit, a relic of his past that he kept for protection. In the chaos that followed, shots were fired. The sound echoed through the alley, drawing attention. The police, who were nearby, rushed to the scene. They found Walt standing with a gun in his hand. To them, it seemed clear. He was the one causing trouble. They reacted quickly, fearing the worst. Walt tried to explain, but in the confusion, his words were lost. An officer, seeing the weapon, fired at Walt, injuring him. As he lay on the ground, Walt managed to say something about federal clearance and protected orders. The officers, however, thought he was just rambling. They took him into custody, unsure of what to make of his claims. The police car's lights flashed as they took Walt to the hospital. He was stable but unconscious. The officers were puzzled. They knew Walt as a quiet, retired man. His words about federal matters added another layer of mystery. At the station, they began to dig into his background, hoping to find answers. Officer Sam Carter, a young recruit, was given the task of looking into Walt's history. He started by searching through public records. What he found surprised him. There was a sealed military file linked to Walt. It had restricted access, something not typical for a man of his age. Sam's curiosity got the better of him. He pushed further, trying to access the file. As he attempted to open it, a security alert was triggered. Unknown to Sam, this alert notified federal authorities. Meanwhile, the sheriff received a call. It was brief and to the point. Agents would be arriving soon. They instructed him to secure Walt and any items found with him. The sheriff followed the orders, though he had more questions than answers. News of the incident spread quickly through Millhaven. People talked about the shooting, each story more dramatic than the last. Some remembered Walt's tales of secret missions and covert operations. Others dismissed them as the fantasies of an old man. But now those stories seemed to carry more weight. The town was buzzing with speculation. At the hospital, Walt lay unconscious, unaware of the stir he had caused. The officers stood guard, unsure of what to expect next. They were waiting for the federal agents, hoping they would bring clarity to the situation. Back at the station, Officer Carter sat at his desk, deep in thought. He felt a mix of regret and curiosity. Regret for misjudging Walt and curiosity about the life he had led. The sealed file hinted at something significant, something beyond their small town. The young officer wondered what secrets Walt held and whether they would soon come to light. As the night wore on, Millhaven remained restless. The cold wind continued to blow, carrying whispers of uncertainty through the streets. In his small house, Walt's belongings lay untouched, waiting for his return. The town, once quiet and predictable, now felt charged with mystery. Everyone awaited the arrival of the federal agents, hoping for answers to the many questions left in the wake of that windy, cold night. Walt was in the hospital under police watch. He lay in a bed, breathing steadily but still unconscious. The officers outside his room were tense. They were unsure about the situation and the mystery surrounding Walt's past. His words about federal clearance echoed in their minds. They wondered if there was more to the old man than they knew. Officer Sam Carter was at the station deep in research. He had stumbled upon a sealed military file linked to Walt. The file was not easy to access. It had layers of security, which was unusual. Sam's attempt to open the file had triggered a security alert. This action had notified federal authorities, adding another layer of mystery to the situation. The sheriff was on edge. A call from a federal agency had informed him that agents would arrive soon. The call was brief, giving no details, only instructions to secure Walt and his possessions. The sheriff followed these orders, but he was filled with questions. He wondered what connection Walt had with federal matters. As Sam continued his search, he found more pieces of Walt's history. There were hints of a military career that was not ordinary. Walt had been part of something classified, something significant. The young officer was drawn deeper into the mystery, driven by a mix of duty and curiosity. Meanwhile, the town of Millhaven was alive with chatter. The news of the shooting had spread quickly. People were shocked and intrigued. Walt's stories of secret missions were now being discussed with more interest. Some residents were skeptical, thinking it was all a misunderstanding. Others believed Walt had been involved in something big. The uncertainty filled the town with a sense of anticipation. At the hospital, nurses moved quietly, checking on patients. They whispered about the old man who was under police guard. Rumors spread, each more dramatic than the last. Walt remained unaware, resting peacefully, his mind far from the chaos outside. Back at the station, Sam Carter felt a growing sense of responsibility. He wanted to understand the truth about Walt. The sealed file was a puzzle he needed to solve. Each piece of information he uncovered added to the complexity. The weight of the mystery pressed on him, urging him to keep digging. The sheriff gathered his officers for a briefing. He explained the situation, sharing what little he knew. They were to remain vigilant and await the federal agents. The officers nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. They were used to dealing with local issues, but this was different. It involved higher authorities and unknown dangers. As night fell, the tension in Millhaven grew. People locked their doors, unsure of what the next day would bring. The wind howled outside, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The streets, usually quiet, felt charged with a strange energy. In his room, Walt began to stir. His mind was slowly waking, memories drifting in and out. Images from his past flickered, moments from a life of service and duty. He thought of his old comrades, their faces clear in his mind. The burden of secrets kept for so long weighed on him, even in sleep. At the station, Sam received a message. It was from the federal agency, confirming the arrival of the agents. They would be there soon, ready to take over the investigation. Sam felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He hoped they would bring answers, yet he feared what those answers might reveal. The sheriff prepared for the agents' arrival. He reviewed the events of the night, ensuring everything was in order. The mystery surrounding Walt had turned their small town upside down. He wondered how it would all unfold, what truths would come to light. As the clock ticked on, Millhaven held its breath. The night was long, filled with questions and speculation. Walt's past was a shadow over the town, a puzzle waiting to be solved. The arrival of the federal agents promised answers, but also brought uncertainty. Walt remained at the center of it all, a man with secrets and stories untold. He lay in the hospital, unaware of the stir he had caused. His life, once quiet and predictable, was now a focal point of mystery and intrigue. The town of Millhaven waited, caught in the grip of a story that was far from over. The morning sun rose over Millhaven, casting long shadows across the town. The air was still cold, but the promise of a new day brought some warmth. At the hospital, Walt began to regain consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, and he took in his surroundings. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of medical machines. Walt shifted slightly, feeling the ache from his injury. Outside his room, officers stood watch. They noticed the change and informed the nurse. Soon, a doctor came in to check on Walt. He had questions, but the priority was ensuring Walt's health. As Walt slowly gained strength, the fog in his mind began to clear. He remembered the events of the previous night, the alley, the struggle, and the misunderstanding. His thoughts then drifted to the documents he had protected for so long. Meanwhile, at the police station, the officers were on alert. The expected arrival of federal agents kept them busy. They prepared the necessary files and evidence ready to hand over the case. The sheriff reviewed the details again, ensuring everything was in order. He felt a mix of anticipation and unease. The situation was beyond their usual scope, and he hoped the agents would bring clarity. A convoy of black SUVs approached the hospital. The vehicles were sleek and unmarked, a clear sign of their purpose. They parked near the entrance, and a team of agents stepped out. Leading them was Agent Emily Ross, a woman known for her calm demeanor and sharp mind. She had been briefed on the situation and was ready to take control. Agent Ross entered the hospital, her team following closely. They moved with purpose, drawing the attention of staff and patients. The presence of federal agents added a layer of seriousness to the air. The officers by Walt's room nodded in acknowledgement, stepping aside to let the agents through. Inside, Walt was slowly sitting up, his mind clearer. He noticed the new faces and sensed the shift in the atmosphere. Agent Ross approached him, introducing herself and explaining their presence. She assured Walt that they were there to help, not to judge. Agent Ross listened as Walt recounted the events. He spoke of the young men in the alley, their attempt to steal something valuable. Walt explained that he had been instructed to keep certain documents safe. They were not just papers but held information vital to national security. He had carried them for years, waiting for a signal from an old contact. That signal had come recently, prompting him to prepare for their transfer. Agent Ross nodded, taking in the details. She was not surprised by the complexity of the situation. Her agency was aware of operations like these, remnants of the Cold War era. She asked Walt about the gun, and he explained its hidden compartment. It contained the documents, a safeguard he had maintained for decades. The officers in the room listened, their earlier judgments fading. The truth about Walt was far more intricate than they had imagined. Agent Ross assured Walt that his actions were understood and appreciated. She promised that the documents would be handled with care and that his role would be acknowledged. Back at the station, Officer Sam Carter felt a sense of relief. The mystery of the sealed file was unraveling, and he was glad to see Walt's name cleared. He watched as the federal agents coordinated with the sheriff, organizing the logistics of the case. Sam felt a mix of regret and respect, having misjudged Walt initially. Agent Ross and her team collected the evidence, including Walt's gun and the hidden documents. They ensured everything was secure, ready for transport. The agents worked efficiently, their focus on maintaining the integrity of the information. In the hospital room, Walt was calm. He had carried a heavy burden for many years, and now it was being lifted. The respect from the agents and the officers meant a lot to him. He appreciated their understanding and the way they handled the situation. The town of Millhaven buzzed with the news of the agents' arrival. People speculated about the significance of Walt's actions. Some felt pride, knowing a resident had been part of something important. Others were simply relieved that the confusion was resolved. As the day went on, the agents prepared to leave. They thanked the local police for their cooperation and assured them the case was in good hands. Agent Ross spoke with the sheriff, expressing gratitude for his handling of the situation. The sheriff nodded, satisfied that justice and truth had prevailed. Walt was cleared of all charges. The misunderstanding was resolved and the federal agents left quietly. They instructed the police to keep the details confidential, understanding the sensitivity of the information. As the convoy of SUVs drove away, Millhaven began to settle back into its usual rhythm. The town had been touched by something larger than itself, leaving a mark on its people. That evening, Walt sat in his hospital room reflecting on the events. He thought of his old comrades, the missions they had undertaken, and the promises made. The weight of secrecy had been heavy, but he felt a sense of peace. He had fulfilled his duty, not for recognition, but for the sake of honor and loyalty. Walt's thoughts drifted to the future. He knew life would return to normal with his daily visits to the diner and chats with Glenn. Yet, there was a new understanding in the town, a respect for the quiet man who had carried great responsibility. As night fell, Millhaven exhaled a collective breath. The mystery was solved and life would go on. But for those who knew the truth, the story of Walt Higgins would be remembered, a testament to the hidden acts of service that often go unseen. Life in Millhaven slowly returned to its usual pace after the events surrounding Walt Higgins. The buzz of the federal agent's visit lingered for a few days, but soon the town settled back into its routine. The local diner where Walt was a regular was once again filled with the clinking of coffee cups and the hum of conversation. Walt was glad to be back home. His recovery was steady, and he was grateful for the support from the community. The sheriff visited him shortly after he returned from the hospital. He offered a sincere apology on behalf of the police department. Walt accepted it with grace, understanding the chaos of the moment. He held no grudges, knowing the officers were only doing their job. The town of Millhaven had gained a deeper respect for Walt. His quiet demeanor and old stories were now seen in a new light. The mystery that had surrounded him was resolved, and people appreciated the role he had played in safeguarding important information. The local veterans group decided to organize a small parade to honor him. It was a simple event, but it carried great meaning. On the day of the parade, the streets filled with townsfolk. Flags were waved and a small band played cheerful tunes. Walt stood on his porch, watching with a mix of pride and humility. He was not one for the spotlight, but he understood the gesture was from the heart. As the veterans marched by, Walt offered a salute, a silent acknowledgement of shared sacrifice and duty. In the days that followed, life resumed its normal rhythm. Walt returned to his evening visits to the diner, where Glenn greeted him with a smile and a warm cup of coffee. The patrons, once curious and doubtful, now nodded at Walt with respect. Small conversations often turned to the topic of his past, but Walt spoke little of it. He preferred to listen, to enjoy the company of his fellow townspeople. The mayor of Millhaven held a small ceremony at the town hall. He presented Walt with a letter of appreciation recognizing his service and the calm way he had handled recent events. Walt accepted it humbly, grateful for the acknowledgement but eager to return to his quiet life. As the weeks passed, whispers of the past incident faded. Yet, the story of Walt Higgins remained a testament to his character and the unseen acts of service he had performed. The town understood that sometimes those who seem the least likely to carry great burdens often do so with quiet dignity. Walt spent his days tending to his garden and maintaining his small home. He cherished the simple pleasures of life, finding joy in the mundane. The wooden box he had received from the federal agents, containing a folded flag and a letter of thanks, sat on his mantel. It was a reminder of promises kept and the weight of secrets held. In quiet moments, Walt would sit on his porch reflecting on the journey he had taken. His thoughts often drifted to old friends, comrades who had shared in the missions of the past. He felt a deep sense of connection to them, knowing they had all played their part in something meaningful. The town continued to thrive, its people going about their daily lives. The streets of Millhaven saw the usual bustle of activity, children playing, and neighbors chatting. Yet, there was a subtle shift, a recognition that even in a small town, stories of courage and duty can unfold, leaving a lasting impact. Walt found peace in his routine, content with how things had resolved. The burden of the documents was lifted, and he felt lighter, knowing he had fulfilled his duty. His life had been a series of quiet moments, punctuated by a single, extraordinary event. It was enough for him, a testament to a life well lived. The people of Millhaven respected Walt, not just for his past but for the person he was. A man who had seen much yet remained humble and kind. The story of Walt Higgins became part of the town's fabric, a reminder that heroes come in many forms, often unnoticed and uncelebrated. As the sun set over Millhaven, casting a warm glow across the town, Walt sat with a sense of contentment. His journey had been long and sometimes challenging, but it was his own. He had protected what mattered, not for applause, but for the sake of duty and honor. In the end, the greatest acts of service are those done quietly without expectation of reward. Walt's story was one such act, a silent echo of courage and integrity. Millhaven was richer for it, having witnessed the strength of a man who had carried a great responsibility with grace. The story of Walt Higgins would endure, a part of the town's history, a testament to the power of quiet service and the impact of a promise kept.